So in my last video, I spoke about how the loss of my beautiful psychic coach Arikala was like my call to action to just stop making excuses and book in to go and train as a Psych K facilitator. And so she had passed away on the 7th of the 7th, 2020, and the Psych K course was to be run in the first week of August. And so I signed up and that was it. I was gonna go, and then in the weeks leading up to that course, I'd been fighting a lot with my husband again, and then with everything that was going on with the so-called pandemic, and then everything that was happening in America with Donald Trump and everything, it just felt like everything just felt surreal, and it felt like I was just watching like the best movie I could have ever possibly imagined, and all I wanted to do was talk to somebody about it. So when my husband would come home from work, I would tell him the latest, and he just thought I was a mad conspiracy theorist. He didn't believe that the pandemic was real, but he also did not believe it was some evil plan by elitist reptilians. And so it didn't matter what I said to him. He just like wasn't interested in anything I had to say, and he never has been. He's never been a good listener. He never makes eye contact or gives you any kind of acknowledgement that he's hearing what you're saying. And so it was just getting really bad at this point, because I just couldn't believe that he could care so little about what was actually going on in the world. And he was just getting more and more pissed off at me about all this elaborate nonsense that I was talking about. And so one of these days he just walked past like he always does, just walked off down the hallway while I was in the middle of a sentence. And I got really pissed. I mean, you know, I have many times, but this was one occasion where I went up to him and just said, you know what, I'm so fucking done. Like, it's like you think you can just ignore me all the time and that I've got nowhere to go, so you can just take me for granted because I'm never gonna leave. But you know what, like, that's it. I don't care what I lose now. I need to get out of here because this is crushing my fucking soul, and I want a partner who I can connect with. And so he just goes, well, if I'm not giving you what you want, what the hell do you think you want? Like, who is this ideal man that, you know, you think you're gonna find? If I don't make you happy, what the hell is gonna make you happy? And so when I'd been working with Ari, she'd been talking about manifestation, and she had been in a really awful relationship, and she had left that relationship, and one day she got really clear and she sat down and she wrote a list of all the qualities that she wanted in a man. And then she ended up reconnecting with a friend, Trevor, and they ended up realizing that they were just the ideal partners for one another. And so she'd been giving examples about becoming really clear about the details of what we want to bring into our world. And I was more thinking about like ideal clients and stuff to do with my home and things and with my children, and I hadn't actually hadn't thought about really what I want in a partner. But I'd been with my husband for 15 years, and while he has plenty of good qualities, he's also shown me very clearly kind of what I don't want. And in that moment when he asked me, well, what do you want? Rather than like just coming back at him for the sake of arguing, I went into this deep place and I thought about everything that Arikala had said And I just went into myself and started deeply thinking about that. And I wasn't even really saying it out loud to answer him, but I just started speaking out loud what it was that I felt would be my ideal partner. And so just to read the list that I'd spoken out loud on that day, I said, I want a man who speaks my soul language, so I'm not forever trying to explain or translate myself. A man that I have incredible resonance with. A man who engages and cares about what's going on in the world around him on a deeper level, who is passionate about breaking down the illusion and finding and living truth in this mad world. A man who I share core values with. A man who's been through heavy stuff and has had his character brought out through it, and who isn't afraid to face his demons, and who proactively works through it and seeks growth. A man who does his shadow work. A man who is not perfect, but who is on the same spiritual path and focused on working on raising his consciousness. A man whose trauma has softened his heart rather than hardening it and caging it in sharp thorns that keep anything from ever touching it. But who also doesn't give his precious energy and kindness away to superficial pursuits, such as people pleasing. A man who can say how he feels and can openly express when something makes him cry or want to cry. A man who plays an instrument and understands the power of music and resonance and vibration and energy. A man who cares about his health and takes care of his mind, body and spirit. A man who is divinely connected and spiritual and sees life as a spiritual experience. A man who listens. A man who values the simple things in life. A man that I can enjoy sacred simplicity with. And so my husband heard all this and just went, the fuck? Like, where do you think you're gonna find a guy like that? And if you find this dream guy who has all of those characteristics, which I don't think you're gonna find, even if he exists out there, how the hell are you gonna bump into him? Like, you don't go anywhere, you're just the mum, you just go along to play groups. And he's like, I don't think you're gonna find it. If you leave me, you're gonna go out there looking, and I think you're just gonna get your heart broken because your expectations are ridiculous. And I just heard that, and I actually just thought, shit, he's right. Like, I don't go anywhere, and I wouldn't know how to meet somebody, and it is unlikely. I felt like it is unlikely that I would meet a guy like that. And yeah, wouldn't have a clue where I could actually meet somebody like that. And so I just went and run myself a bath and went to just cry in the bath, realizing like I was pretty doomed. I just basically like gave up on that idea, just realizing like it was pretty unrealistic. And so yeah, I kind of just forgot about it. And then a few weeks later, I headed out to go to the Psych K workshops, and I was so focused on just like learning the modality and having it as something that I could help myself with, but also offer my clients, and I just couldn't wait to have this process available to me. And so yeah, I was just like laser focused on that. And then I remember walking into this room and there just being like so many other people. And I was like, what? There's other people here? Because for some reason it just didn't occur to me that there'd be other people there. And so during that week, you know, I met a lot of really lovely people, and it was actually really like pleasant surprise to be surrounded by all these like-minded people. But unfortunately, when I first went in, I accidentally sat next to this dude who then asked me to partner up with him and got really, really pushy, wanting me to come outside alone with him. And he kept pushing that we needed to like find somewhere to do this alone. And I was so not comfortable with that. Like he had such a sleazy vibe, and kept ignoring when I said no, and just pushing and pushing. And then he started telling me about how he has some anger issues, and that people kind of got to watch out for him because of his anger. And it just felt really gross and threatening. And so for a couple of days, he just kind of, every time we practice a balance, he would just like make a beeline for me, and I'd be partnered up with him. And then after a few days, I found a woman, and I just said, please, can you just, I just need to partner up with you. I'm sorry if like you've made a connection with somebody else here, but can we just partner up instead, because I don't want to be stuck with him. And so that was just the basic workshop. And then there was a few days break, and then the instructor was running an advanced workshop, and it was a much smaller, like more intimate group. And so because I was coming from a bit of a distance, I had to kind of drive to the station and then catch the train and then walk from the station or catch a bus from the station over to where the RSL club was that this workshop was being run in. And the buses all worked out fine in the morning, but then for the evening to get back to the station, they were just sort of all over the shop. And it was just a long way home, and I was really exhausted because I was still up breastfeeding my son all night. And so I started to ask some of the women from the course if any of them might be able to give me a lift at the station. And I'm not sure why, but a lot of them were kind of like, oh, I don't know, it might be a bit out of my way. I don't know, we'll see. And then there was this one woman there who she really wanted to be helpful. So she didn't realize that I was only asking the women because after just having that experience with that guy at the previous workshop, I really didn't want to end up in a car alone with some guy that I didn't know. And so I wasn't going to put myself in that position, but she didn't realize, and she went off to ask some of the people outside of the room if anybody was driving who might be able to just drop me at the station on their way past. And then she came back in the room, and people were kind of coming into the room, but she came in first, and she just said to me, oh, Pete Murray can give you a lift. I'm just going to call him Pete Murray, that's not his name. But just to keep his identity protected as well, I would just call him Pete Murray. So she goes, oh, Pete Murray said that he can give you a lift. And I just went, oh shit, that's a guy. And I was like, I froze a bit for a moment and was like, shit, how am I going to get out of this? Oh, this is so annoying. And then I looked up, and I wanted to know who Pete Murray was. And at that moment, all these people are walking in the room, and then they all just kind of cleared out of the way. And this guy walks in, and she goes, oh, this is him. And I made eye contact with him, and in that moment, it was like I went from feeling like I am not getting in the car with some random dude to just, it was the weirdest sensation, like looking at my own self in the mirror, and this feeling just washed straight over me that I was completely safe and that it was okay. Like he would take care of me. It was okay. And he sort of said, yeah, I can give you a lift. And then I didn't really think any more of it. We just got on with the workshop. And I guess it's interesting because that was the first time I guess I'd like made eye contact with this guy. And later, once I started thinking about it, I hadn't even noticed him at the first workshop. I knew that there was a few guys at the back, in the back corner, but I just didn't notice him. But interestingly, we spent a few days there together, and in the suburb actually where my mum and dad met. And then as I'd been walking up to the venue for the advanced workshop, he'd been standing there chatting to this woman who'd asked him if he could give me a lift. And it's funny because I was a bit like snobby actually towards him, and I thought, oh, that guy looks too blokey to be at something like this, and I was like, oh, he shouldn't be here. And then later he came inside and we were sort of sitting down, and the instructor asked where his car was, if he wanted to park his car inside, and he said, oh no, I've just parked on the street somewhere. And then the instructor's like, oh no, you can't do that, like this is Sydney. And because he'd come from the country somewhere. And so the instructor's like, bring your car down and I'll let you into the parking here. And he kind of just sat there, and I was like, oh my god, are you slow? Like, hurry up and go and get your car, you idiot. You're gonna end up with a fine. And so finally he went and got his car. But now I think it's kind of interesting that my first impressions of him were like I was pretty harsh and snobby. So anyway, the workshop went on and we all kind of were talking, and like, I don't know, if I'd grab a tea and at the break and sit down, often like he seemed to just come and sit right near me, or if I was standing somewhere, he'd come and just stand over near me. And at the time I didn't feel like, you know, he liked me or something. It was just, I somehow just felt like he was somehow like a little bit magnetized towards me, and I thought he was really, really nice, but definitely kind of didn't feel like attraction or anything. And I remember just like noticing him often just coming to be around me, and I wasn't kind of judging it or thinking into it or anything, but I just noticed it, and it was like I was just quietly observing it. It was just something I noted. It's just like, I don't know, something energetic that was happening. It didn't mean a lot, but yeah, I just noticed it. And so, so we didn't really work together as partners much, but on one of the days we did, and we did something called the rapport balance, which is about being okay, comfortable when somebody is talking to you in rapport, but also when somebody breaks rapport with you, so that you don't get kind of thrown by worrying if they're acknowledging you or not or whatever. So we did that balance together, and so we just had to kind of like speak, just talk and talk and talk about any old thing. And again, like just doing that balance with him, I just thought he was really, really lovely. And he spoke about how like he's a guitarist, and then this woman who'd asked him to give me the lift, she kept saying stuff to me like, oh, you should be in a band with him. And she kept saying that we're so similar. And I found that when we were talking about like everything that was going on in the world with the whole group, we often had watched like exactly the same videos or knew about the same sort of subjects that other people didn't necessarily know that specifically about. And this woman had come up to me later at one point and just said, oh my god, like you guys are really, really similar. It's kind of weird. And yeah, I didn't really think that much about it. I was just like, yeah, it's really, really cool meeting like really lovely people. But I didn't kind of single him out as anything like special. I did notice that I felt like we were very similar, but yeah, at that point, like it didn't mean anything to me really. And so we went through the week, and then on the last day, in the final like half hour of this course, our instructor was just kind of giving a wrap up, and I was like so absorbed in what he was saying. I was on such a high from this awesome course and meeting all these awesome people, and he was saying like all this stuff about how this modality was channeled down, and it's like as if it was given by like a higher intelligence for people to come and learn it and really help humanity through some of the most difficult and darkest times that we've seen in probably forever. And he was kind of like, you guys have all come here for a special reason, and now it's go time. Like, get out there and use this and help. And as he said that, this glass bottle of water, like table water that had been sitting on the table all day, out of nowhere, after he said that, it just split into like 3 pieces. First, it just kind of cracked, and the water just came flooding out, down over the table, down over the floor, and then the whole bottle just like fell into 3 pieces. And we all ran, we were all working together to like mop this mess up. And then we sat down, and everybody's just like, that was really weird. And the instructor's like, what did I say before that? And it was like, you said it's go time. And so I don't know whether it's just like the energy in the room split the bottle, but it was crazy. And so anyway, he gets back on with his talk, and I'm just like getting goosebumps, just going, oh my gosh, I know why I was here. I'm so glad things worked out the way they did, because I just feel it with like every cell in my body that that I was meant to be here, and that this is just going to lead me to incredible things, and that this whole experience has just been life-changing. And so that was it. I was just completely like absorbed in what he was saying. And then out of absolutely nowhere, I just suddenly got a bit dizzy. And then I realized that I was really quite dizzy, and I started to feel a bit like I couldn't hear anybody anymore, and a little bit like I was kind of blacking out somewhere. And I grabbed onto my chair because I thought I was going to fall off, and I had like a little bit of a panic really, because it almost felt, well, it felt a lot like when I would go into my gallstone attacks, when I'd start to pass out with them. And I had this brief moment where I thought, should I be telling somebody what's happening to me? But then that was it. I just went deeper in, and all of a sudden I realized like there was this heat building up from like my root chakra, and just coming up, rising up through my body. And at the same time, there was just insane like butterflies, like oxytocin, and like I've never ever felt in my life. Like it was just out of this world intense. And I was like I was struggling to breathe, and I'm wondering if I was about to fall off the chair. And I just thought to myself, this is so weird, I don't understand what's going on. Like I feel like I am just like head over heels in love, but I don't get it, because I'm not. I'm not in love with anybody. And then in my mind I just thought to myself, I just went like, what the hell is going on? And then at that moment, my head just like involuntarily just turned straight at this guy, Pete Murray. And I was just like, what the hell? Oh my God. And I quickly turned my head down and hoped that nobody had noticed. And I was just like trying to breathe, trying to stay calm, not knowing what was happening to me. And then all of a sudden, I started having these flashbacks to every single quality on my list that I had listed out loud the spell I had cast 2 weeks earlier, when my husband had asked me what was the kind of guy who would make me happy. And so just to go back over that list, I'd see a quality that I listed and then how this guy just matched it. So I saw us speaking one another's soul language, and like that just amazing feeling of actually being understood, of connecting with somebody who gets my weird and who is just as much of a bonkers like conspiracy theorist as I am. And hearing all week what a passionate truther he is. Experiencing attending a Psych K workshop with him. Like, there he was, proactively seeking growth and healing. And hearing about some of the heavy stuff he'd been through, including hearing him talk about how he'd somehow miraculously survived cancer through the conscious and simple realization and decision that he wasn't going to die from it. And the struggles that he's faced as a single dad, having his children traumatically taken away from him and fighting to get them back. And then hearing him, this like masculine coal miner from the country, openly talking about his emotions with like no shame, and he was just able to talk about his emotions, about how, you know, if something made him cry or made him want to cry, he just said it to everyone. He was just totally open about that. And then hearing him talk so affectionately about his children, but seeing the pain in his eyes, with the absolute softness and kindness, and just appreciating his kind-heartedness as he like caringly checked every single day. He would check just to see if I still needed a lift. Learning that he was a guitarist, and then hearing him talk about how he wishes that the gym was open earlier in the morning so that he could go in and like work out when he woke up early in the morning. And that was kind of like while we both were sitting there eating real food for lunch, which it's just coming from a husband who he would never eat anything healthy if it's up to him. Like, he would always prefer to go to Hungry Jack's. And he really resisted all my attempts to feed the family healthier food. Like, that's just been a massive battle. So to see this single dad dude just out like buying, I don't know, sushi and salads or something, it was like, I just respected that. And then learning that he's very spiritual and has a strong connection to the divine in his life. Then remembering a seemingly insignificant moment during the rapport balance that we did together, where see, during that balance, one person has to talk, and first the other partner has to like keep rapport with them, like acknowledge them and keep that bond up and that eye contact and everything. But then when you do it again, the next time the one person has to talk and the other person has to suddenly just break rapport and like just not care anymore and just not make eye contact and not give a shit what the other person's saying. And so when we'd done that, when I was talking at the end of it, he just goes, oh, it's really hard not to listen to what you're saying. And even though like he could have said that to anybody, it was just kind of like the fact that we'd been in a situation where those words came out of his mouth towards me when it was so important to me to find a man who would listen to me. It just, that moment suddenly sprung back out, and I saw it in this kind of flashback that I was having. And so yeah, also seeing all the bonding that we'd shared that week, all the times he'd sat and listened to me attentively. Like, I remember he'd ask me questions and things, we'd chat, and I was sitting there kind of like quite put out by this because I was not used to having any man listen to what I had to say, and I kind of thought, oh, he's this like cool, rough coal miner guy, guitarist, like why would he care what stupid little old mumsy me has to say? And so I felt very like self-conscious in a way, actually talking about myself to him, because I was like, why would he care? I'm not cool enough for somebody like that. But yet he'd sat there and like given me his absolute full attention and just asked more questions, and yeah, he just seemed like genuinely, authentically engaged. And so then one of the other things that came up in this flashback was hearing him talk about like these beautiful memories that he had of just going fishing, and like, I don't know, I think he said they'd cook this fish in like nothing but butter, and how that was just so simple but just the best thing ever, and then they just share it with whoever was around, like in the park at the time, and just, yeah, how simple but beautiful it was. And I was like, yep, there's that sacred simplicity, that appreciation of just like the little things. And so this was all like really, really intense for me, and as I said, like I didn't know what was happening to me. It was a really, really intense experience. And so then it got even weirder, and while I'm in this state, just completely inward to myself, having all these realizations and flashback sort of things, then all of a sudden it got way weirder, and I suddenly had this flashback. So like I've never had past life flashbacks before, but all of a sudden I saw us like on some sort of military ship, and it seemed like it was like we were both in military uniforms that seemed kind of vintage, and I think it was like the hall where they all eat, like a cafeteria sort of area, and it seemed like it was nighttime, and that all the tables and chairs had been kind of put away to the side of the hall so that it was just empty. And in this flashback we were just like slow dancing together, and then all of a sudden I saw us in what I gather was like ancient Greece, because we were in like kind of white robes and things. And that one I won't go into what was happening there because it was a bit sexual and X-rated. But then after seeing that, I saw us in like really kind of primitive clothing, and it was like we were I don't know, foraging for root vegetables or something, and we were just like throwing them at one another and pissing ourselves laughing, just, I don't know, dicking around. And then that ended, and I came back into the room, and it was like all the sensation and everything stopped, but I was kind of just like in shock. I had no fucking idea what had just happened to me, and I was really freaked out, and I was also really like, I felt really self-conscious, like, oh, I hope nobody saw that and nobody's gonna ask me if I'm okay, because I don't even know what to say. And so the instructor kept talking, and he kind of just wrapped things up, and then that was it. The course was over, and everybody kind of stood up and started giving each other hugs and stuff, and all of a sudden this guy's just there with his arms open, Amelia, right in front of me, and gave me this beautiful hug. And I kind of was like trying to repress what had just happened, because I like I needed just some space and privacy to like process it. But he gave me this hug, and it was so beautiful, and I just had this thought, like I felt so magnetically drawn to him, like I didn't want to let go. And I had this thought, like, I just want to escape this fucking matrix with you. And then he asked me again, do you still need that lift? And so then he took me and this other woman back to the car, and it was pissing down raining, and we got in the car and we're driving through all this rain, and this is like the very middle of the city, so it's like crazy busy, cars everywhere, and this rain was so heavy. And then we're driving along, and we were just talking about the whole course and how good it was and how we're going to do the next one, the master's course and everything. And then like he was kind of wrapped up in that, and he was also absolutely exhausted because he'd driven like I don't know 5 or 6 hours or something from where he'd lived, like early in the morning, and then the course was really intense, and then he had to drive back all that way, and he was really tired, and he accidentally drove straight through a red light in like this massive intersection in the middle of Sydney City, right near Central Station. And as we're coming into the intersection, he just goes, shit, that's a red light. And not a single car, like, you know, we could have been taken out, but no cars came through. And then through this crazy rain, we all suddenly realised there's a cop car sitting on the side of the road, just on the other side of this intersection. And he was just like, oh shit. And then we kept driving, and this cop car just didn't even see us. And so we're all laughing, just going, what the hell? What was that? So lucky. And then that was it. He just dropped us off. We had to quickly get out of the car and run through the rain up to the station. So it was just like really quick goodbye. And then I got up to the platform and hopped on this train, and luckily it was like a Sunday evening or something, and there just wasn't really anybody on the train up to the mountains, and so the carriage that I hopped into was empty. And I just got into this carriage, and everything just poured out of me, and I just like burst into tears crying, and just suddenly it hit me like, shit, I just manifested that dude, I think. Whoops. And he is out there, but I'm married with kids, and he lives so far away. And yeah, I just wept. I just cried so hard because it was like, it was just so unfair. It was like, how could I have met this dude, this dream guy, and be feeling this much for him? And there's like no realistic way we can be together. And it was horrible actually to have those feelings, because it was like, fuck, this just makes my life so much more complicated. Like, I wanted to get out of this marriage so badly, and I was so miserable, but at least there wasn't somebody else. And so now I knew that he was out there, and fuck, it just made me feel so much more like so much more torn and in so much more pain. And so yeah, I was just sitting on the train, and I just thought, how weird is it that that even though like we hadn't spoken in that first workshop, it was just strange to think that that was kind of our first physical encounter, and that that it was like where my parents met. And it's kind of like, if they hadn't have met there, then I wouldn't have come into existence. So it's kind of like, it's just that spot, it's it's like there's something energetically charged about that place in relation to my life. But yeah, so he drove his long drive home, and then the next day or something, we sort of messaged each other to check that one another got home safely and everything. And we spoke a little bit, and then he just kind of didn't respond again to my messages. I'd been trying to suss out a little bit, if he was in fact single. I couldn't 100% remember whether he'd said that or not. And he confirmed that, he was just there with his sons. I mean, not necessarily that he was single, but although actually, yeah, his Facebook profile said that he was single. But yeah, what difference should that make to me? Because I was married and I wanted to have a baby. So I just had to stuff that all down, and I did go into definite periods of like denial about how I felt. But later, once I learnt about this whole twin flame phenomenon, everything, my experience made sense. But at the time, I had no idea what was wrong with me, and I couldn't understand really how I could feel this strongly for some guy that I'd only hung out with like for a few days. And this was just like the intensity of what I was feeling didn't seem to make sense, and it continued to be really overwhelming. Like almost immediately I just started dreaming about him, and I don't really dream about people unless they're just like in my everyday life. I dream like pretty mundane stuff, just with like my kids, and in the past people I'd work with, or my parents or something, just people that I see pretty regularly. But he was coming into my dreams, and it was like he was communicating with me, like really getting my attention in a really direct way that I don't normally experience from dreams. Like normally in dreams, like people might say something to me, but it's kind of, it feels like a dream. It's just kind of floaty, and people come and go and different things happen, and I kind of just watch it like a fly on the wall almost. But when he would come into my dreams, it was like he was there to give me a message. And yeah, I would have really intense dreams about him, and have like spontaneous orgasms that were just completely out of this world, and like nothing I'd ever experienced. And then I would wake up from this and I would just be crying, and it was like this intense, like cathartic release, and I wouldn't really understand like what was going on. But as I'd be crying, I'd just be thinking, I don't know how, but like he's healing me. I would just be thinking, you're healing me. I don't know what you're doing, but you're healing me. Now I realize I was healing me. But he'd set off something in his energy, had just somehow resonated with something in my energy, and I don't know, I was just experiencing something intense, and I've never had that strong feelings for somebody. Never felt that. It was just a strange kind of like soul connection. I would always just have this visualization, which was kind of a bit strange because it wasn't something that I feel like I had to create. It just kind of came to me that I would always see myself meeting him through this portal, and that I would meet him in this house overlooking a beach on the south coast, and I would always see this image of myself with him, like in this sun-filled lounge room, like overlooking the ocean, and that I would be like wrapped around him from behind, just like resting my cheek on his back while he just played the guitar, and everything would just be so like zen and blissful, and that it just felt like my ultimate idea of peace and like bliss and happiness and tranquility. Then I would also try not to think about him, because I didn't want this to be complicating my life, because I didn't want to have to face having to like make decisions and hurt the people in my life, like my children, by pursuing what was going on inside me at all. And so we basically didn't really speak. We kind of like each other's posts a little bit on Facebook, but I had a lot going on, and once again I was anxious about trying for my final baby. I really wanted still to bring this daughter into the world, and it was just a bit depressing, because I would openly speak to my husband about the fact that I didn't want to be with him anymore, and that I didn't feel like we were partners anymore, but that it felt like if I didn't have this baby with him, that I would miss out on bringing my daughter into the world, because I couldn't see how I could meet somebody and like start up a whole nother relationship, like with the intention of bringing a baby into the world together. That just seemed major, and it felt like too big a risk to take, that I might not be able to, and I didn't want I didn't want to have a huge gap and then go back into those kind of like baby making days again. So it didn't feel like there was any way out of the marriage, so I just thought again, like, well, there's no way out, so I may as well at least use this situation to bring my daughter into the world. And again, like, maybe things will work out, maybe it'll be okay. But yeah, but we were trying, and my heart just wasn't there. And so for both my sons, it was like first time trying, boom, I was pregnant, but this time it just wasn't happening. And we'd always joked anyway that my husband's, they say that it's the father's sperm that dictates whether or not, like the sex of the baby. And so we'd always joked that down the paternal line there was very, very few women, and that maybe they just couldn't make girl babies. Part of me thought, oh well, maybe it means like we're overdue for a girl baby, so it's got to be a girl, right? But yeah, we just had a long running joke that he could not produce female sperm. And so I did a Psych K balance around it, on the belief my body only accepts female sperm. And so I just wasn't getting pregnant. We were trying and trying, and at this point I found it actually quite difficult even to be intimate with him. And then the time was ticking, and it had been half a year and we hadn't managed to conceive. And it was now getting to the point where I didn't really want there to be any more of a gap. I just felt like if this isn't going to happen now, then I give up. And it's just the universe saying that this isn't meant to be. And so we were going to try for one more month. And so, being the last shot, I thought, okay, I'm going to balance in a new belief. And so I did a balance on the belief I fall pregnant quickly and easily with a baby girl. And then that month I fell pregnant, and I wasn't sure what the gender of the baby was. I was desperately waiting for my ultrasound to find out the gender, and then the little bubby decided that he or she would absolutely not reveal themselves. And this ultrasound just went on and on and on and on and on. And we just couldn't get a glimpse. And then I remember looking up at the roof, and there was this plaster moldings on the ceiling. It was an old sort of building, and they were these flowers that looked so much like vaginas or vulvas. And I just remember thinking, I reckon that's my sign that it's a girl. And the universe is just saying, you don't need to come in here with all this kind of invasive technology to go trying to get answers. Like, just trust. And here's your little sign that it is a girl, so just trust. She's coming to Earth, it's okay. But yeah, it was a difficult rest of that pregnancy, not knowing. And the whole pregnancy was actually really, really difficult. It was at a time when they were locking us down and doing all this crap, and I didn't get to see my midwife until I was 28 weeks pregnant, which I should have actually had my first appointment with her when I was 12 weeks pregnant. So that was really, really emotionally hard. And I'd had this hope that when I got pregnant, perhaps it might actually bring my husband and I closer together. I don't know why I thought that, because every single time I get pregnant, it's like all his fears come up. I mean, it's a huge thing, having a new life on the way, a new little human to have to take care of. But it's like it triggers off something in him where he really, I guess because of his parents' beliefs, he can't stand it when I get pregnant and I am more emotionally needy, and also when I need to rest more and take better care of myself. He just seems to get very resentful about me not being up and doing all my womanly household sort of duties. But emotionally, he just becomes incredibly cold and distant. And so, once again though, I had hoped that perhaps he would step up and be there for me, especially considering how traumatic the previous pregnancy had been. I kind of thought maybe he'd try and make up for that and just be a bit more present for me. But once again, he was just gone. He didn't want to know. He couldn't listen to me. He couldn't acknowledge me. We were fighting more. All this resentment was building again. And I just felt completely separate from him. No connection at all. No intimacy. And with everything like intensifying still yet more in the world, again, we were just like chalk and cheese with our views. Yeah, because I was becoming more and more sort of really following all that spiritual stuff that he saw was so woo-woo and stupid. And I was just feeling more and more lonely to just see how like disconnected we were. So that all just put me into a really, really awful place, and so much of that pregnancy was just so incredibly painful and lonely and distressing, and I was just crying myself to sleep at night and going and crying in the bath and just so restless. Like I had so much misery in my heart, and I didn't want to make myself sick again. Like I knew that by not listening to myself and my needs previously, I'd ended up really, really unwell and like almost dying from that. And so I'd promised myself that I wasn't going to do that to myself again, and yet I couldn't see now how I could possibly leave the marital home, somehow support myself now with 3 children, especially at a time when like the world was so rocky. And so yeah, everything was just really getting extremely painful, and I hadn't wanted to have been thinking about this other guy, but it was just like I just couldn't stop, and it got worse and worse and worse, and it had been like a whole year. I'd told my mum about him, and I told her how much I wanted to leave the marriage, and I'd said there's just got to be a way that we can do this and keep everything like amicable for the kids, and find like a living situation where we're living really close, and surely there's a way we can manifest this. But anyway, so I couldn't stop thinking about this other guy, and I just thought, if he walked into my life 2 weeks after making that list, like, oh, surely that's got to mean something. And so I just remember one night I was just crying my eyes out in the bath, and that night it had been a year since we'd messaged each other or anything, and that night I just went crazy, and it got too intense, and I just said so strongly out to the universe, I need to know if this is something. If this man is meant to be in my life, then he will message me, like he will reach out to me. I'm not going to be the one to reach out to him. He will reach out to me, and then it will be soon enough from this request that I will know that it is a divine sign. And so I'd put it out there to the universe, and I'll talk about what happened next in my next video. So until then.
Stop our lustful, loving hunger. We were young, we never looked ahead or behind. Never dreamt of what troubles we would find. Ooh. Slowly things began to unwind. The world around us warping, trying to tell about our fate.